Hello and welcome to the first video in this Mixing Emo series where I will show absolutely everything that went into mixing this song. Just quickly, if you make pop punk or emo music and you want your next song to sound like this one, then please head over to terrybeckleyrecording.com and message me saying hey, just hey, and I will get back to you. The link is in the description. So this video will start with the mix bus processing and then go through mixing of the kick and snare. So let's get into it. Okay, mix bus. So first up, I've got some console saturation where I use a non-linear summer from Waves, and this gives it a nice analog feel with some pleasant sounding saturation and a little bit of energy as well. Then that will go into the Townhouse bus compressor here. I always experiment with these attack and release times, but I usually end up going on the slowest release and the fastest attack, which really sort of gives it energy and lets the transients come through, which you want in aggressive pop punk, emo, metal even, genres like that. And then lastly, I've got a Pultec EQ here, which is sort of known as the Pultec trick, although it's not really a trick. It's just that with a Pultec, if you boost and attenuate the same amount, it will cut around the boost, so it makes it a lot more smoother. I'm sure anyone that's used a Pultec EQ knows that. And so I've got it here boosting 30, also attenuating 30, and boosting 12k here, and attenuating 12k there. It gives you a nice like smiley face on your EQ curve. If you think about the EQ of the entire track, boost the low, boost the high. Which I just sort of, it's very, very subtle, but I love how that sounds. And when you're mixing, you do have this choice as to whether to mix into mix bus compression and mix bus settings or not. I tend to do it. I think if I start mixing and then throw on some mix bus stuff, it throws my mix off. I'd rather mix into it, know how much compression and energy and saturation is already there. Let's hear it before and after. Apart from the obvious volume change, which of course you're going to get, it is gain stage that it goes into the stereo bus at about -6 to -9. You should hear transient information coming through on the drums a bit more. Obviously, when we mix the drums, it's going to be a lot more evident, but that's what I like the Townhouse to do. The saturation stops it from sounding too, or from jumping out too much. And the EQ gives it a little bit of a push at the low end and the top end. And I just wanted to mention that at the end of these videos, I will go through where I got the various samples and source tones from, as I think that could be really helpful, but I don't want to bore you with that if you're not interested. So we'll go straight on to kick. Okay, kick drum. As you can see, we have kick in. We have a sample that I actually muted, so I won't talk about that one. We've got a kick trigger sample and a kick out sample, which is like a kick sub. And there, as you can see, bus one, bus one, bus one, they are all going to this kick bus here, which is where I actually do most of the processing. I like to treat all the different kick samples and kick sounds as one kick drum. So first up, we have the FG Stress, which is a distressor plugin, set to 20 to 1. It's actually a setting that I know Sam Pura uses. I gave it a try and I really loved it. And I've actually slowed the attack right down there to get the most transient I can out of it. And then the release is super quick as well. It's not the quickest it could be, but I would have gone as quick as it could and then dialed it back slowly to find the right feel for the song. It's not that quick of a song, so I didn't want to just, have a really sort of pointy kick. And then we've got this messy looking Pro Q3 here. Quite daunting at first, but if you think about it, you've got three different things happening. You've got top end control here, then you've got cutting out some mids, and then this is different various, probably boomy, muddy bits of this sub. And then rolling off, gently rolling off. Looks like about 40 hertz here. I will do that by ear. I won't do that by numbers. I know I used to do it by numbers, but filters and curves, they're complicated things. So you've got to do what sounds right. So let's hear the kick drum without and then with those settings. And now with. Okay, looks like we've got another Pultec EQ going on here. This is just to boost some top end at 8K, which can help it push through the guitars. A good important thing with pop punk, metal, and all that kind of stuff is you want to match the attack sound, if you will, of the kick drum to the guitar tone. They have to sound cohesive. It's really hard to put your finger on what that is, but I just sort of mess around with the top end of the kick until I find something that just sort of sounds like it's pleasing and fits with the guitars. It's easier to do it that way if you have already locked in your guitar tone, of course. And then I've got some SSL E-channel EQ boosting 50 hertz on a bell curve here. Different EQs, I like how they sound for different bands, so that's why I've got the Pultec doing the top end boost 8K, and then I've got the SSL doing the 50 hertz boost for the sub and the low end. And then on top of that, we've got some JST clip, not doing too much, but JST clip is great for vibe and attitude and energy. Can make your samples sound less out of the box, give it a bit more individuality. And then with all that, we've got a C4, which is a multi-band compressor, bypassing everything apart from the sub. So I am controlling everything from 90 hertz down. Anything that starts to build up too much, if there's quick kicks and stuff like that, it will pull that down. So it won't really be doing too much on the normal hits. It's only when that low end starts to build up. Very important to keeping a consistent low end. Very important in these genres. So let's have a listen to everything we've got so far. This is everything bypassed again. Now everything so far in. Okay, great. What I would have done now, once I'd got the whole mix to a certain point, is I would check it in my car and other places that I knew really well, which would explain these other two Pro Q3s here. So I'm pulling out some 3K, which I must not have liked, boosting a bit more at 50 hertz, and then cutting around it, sort of similar to what a Pultec EQ would do. And I think I know this last one is to beef it up a bit. Yeah, so I just slapped a low shelf on there. In the car, it would have sounded thin. It wouldn't have come through the bass. I needed to add some weight to it. Especially modern emo, it's got a big kick. You can't get away with a tippy-tappy kick anymore. So that's what this will have done. Haven't got to overcomplicate it, just bash a shelf on there. And let's have a listen to all the processing off and then on. And on. The most important thing there is that high or that low shelf at the end completes the kick sound, the one I had in my head. Okay, let's move on to snare. So we have three elements of the snare. We've got the normal snare, the main snare sample. We have a triggered sample, and then we've got the snare bottom, which adds that sizzle. Again, like the kick, I like to treat all the snare tracks as one sound on the snare bus mostly, but you'll see here there is an EQ on the main sample there. It won't be doing much. Let's have a look. Yeah, we're pulling out probably a little bit of frequencies I didn't like. Not important to note that when you're pulling out a frequency, this is something I had to learn, you're not removing that frequency, you're just reducing that frequency. Because I used to think to myself, I can't EQ fundamentals and I can't EQ the bits that I've just boosted, for example, because I was thinking, I've just boosted them, why would I want to take them away? It's the fundamental, I can't take it away. But you're not taking it away, you're just reducing it. That might be obvious to people. It wasn't obvious to me. It took me a long time to realize that I could EQ there if I wanted to. I was just reducing it, taming it, bringing it in line with the rest of the spectrum. I wasn't getting rid of it. But I don't suppose this is doing too much. Let's listen in solo and see what it's taking away. It's super subtle. It focuses the sound a bit, gets rid of some mids, which makes the top end and the low end a lot clearer, but it's quite hard to listen to. It's quite hard to notice. I'll play you the bands so you can hear what I'm actually taking out. I'll solo them. See, they're not the nicest of sounds, and they were blurring up my snare sample, I thought. Okay, so that blended with the other two samples takes me to the snare bus. So We're starting with a FG stress again. Probably, yeah, less aggressive here. We've still got a slow attack, so we're letting a lot of the attack through. Not as fast, but still quite a fast release. It's a fast genre, but this song is a little slower than like usual pop punk stuff. It's more in the emo territory. And again, 20-1, good old Sam Pura. And then next we've got some EQ. It won't be drastic. It will just be sort of fine-tuning areas of it to make it fit with the guitars and the kick so that it sounds like it's one cohesive sound. Over EQing samples can make them sound so fake and so plastic. Again, did that for years. Finally learned the error of my ways. So these are probably typical snare frequencies. Yeah, just under 200 hertz. Usually it's around 200, the punch of a snare. I think with this one, I was just moving this around until I felt like it was fitting with the song. I'm not arbitrarily just boosting and cutting things because it's a sample. It already sounds pretty good anyway. I'm just trying to push it towards the to fit the song better, to fit the rest of the instruments. Got a 4.5 decibel boost here at, what's that, 5K. Now it looks like I boosted the around 6K and then I got rid of it again, which is why that button's pressed in. That's it, two moves really. Quite a big boost here, around that 5K, and then a 157 hertz. And then here we have distortion, my absolute secret weapon on snare. I saw this on a Of Mice and Men song, and I thought that is going to change my life, and it has. Well, my mixing life anyway. I'll just open it up from Logic. The best thing to do is to make this full spectrum here, this tone thing, just whack it up to 20,000 hertz. That's what makes this trick work, and then you can mess around with how much drive you want. But let's hear the snare with and without that distortion, and I'll show you what I mean. See, the meters don't jump that much when you put the distortion in, but it does get louder. It's like such a pleasing extra loudness, I guess. I don't know how I ever mix snare without using that. There are, of course, various room sounds and snare room sounds that go into the overall snare mix, but I will cover that in one of the future videos of this series, so keep your eyes peeled if you want to see that, or better yet, subscribe, and hopefully then you won't miss it. Okay, so that's the kick and snare mix settings. Okay, I promised I would show the samples that I chose, so let me deliver on that. Okay, so the main kick and snare samples came from GGD Modern and Massive. The kick sample would not have been the default steel, it would have been this one here, the Tama Star Classic. Forgive me, I don't know exactly what that is. I just know that that's the one that sounded like it had the best beef to it when I was flicking through, and most often if I'm working program drums and I'm designing the drum sound, that would be my basis for it. Snare would have been, yeah, the brass snare, the one that it loads up by default. That's not the end of it there. We as you saw, we had trigger running. So on the kick, the trigger is actually one of my own samples here. You will see it's called Dragged Under, and yes, that is reference to the band Dragged Under. I saw the Produce Like a Pro tutorial where they were mixing Chelsea by Dragged Under, and I loved how the mid-range sound. So I made my own sample and tried to make it as close to that as possible. So that's what that is. If you guys want the TCI files, so you have trigger and you want the TCI files, hit me up in the comments, and I'll stick it in a Google Drive folder or something, and you can download it. I've got a snare trigger as well. And again, this is a Dragged Under one-shot snare. It's me trying to emulate the snare sample from the Dragged Under session tutorial that I watched, and also blended in with the AC snare, which comes with trigger. So obviously I can't share the AC snare because you'll get it with trigger. I don't think I had the permission to just start distributing that out. But again, if you want the Dragged Under TCI file, hit me up in the comments and I will I'll stick it up in a Google Drive folder. Or even if you just want like the one-shot WAV file, I can do that. Let me know. In fact, as a bonus, why don't I show you what it sounds like with and without that one shot in there, so you can see what those samples are doing if you did ever want to make your own. So let's solo the kick, and I will mute and unmute that one-shot kick sample. There's a bit of roominess in there, bit of mid-range in there. That's why I wanted to do the best I could to emulate the Dragged Under one. And let's do the same with the snare. Let's mute this, and I'll bring it in. That brings so much like mid-range smack to the snare sound. Really, really like it. They are really important samples to the sound I like to get and the sound I have in my head. So yeah, if you do want them, hit me up in the comments and I'll stick them in a Google Drive folder. But okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I will add the next one up as soon as I can, where I'll go through the toms, overheads, and room sounds. So again, if you make this kind of music and you'd like a mix from me, then head over to terrybeckleyrecording.com and contact me saying, hey, the link is in the description. I hope this helps you make better music, and I'll see you at the next one.